Power doesn't belong to the smartest person in the room anymore. It belongs to the one who understands how people think they're being smart, the one who knows how to let others reveal their hand while keeping his own invisible. If Machiavelli were alive today, he wouldn't be sitting in a palace. He'd be sitting quietly in the corner of every boardroom, every algorithm, every negotiation, smiling as everyone thought they were the ones in control. Because real power has never been about who talks the most. It's about who shapes what others talk about. Rule 1. Never let people know what game you're playing. In a world obsessed with transparency, that might sound backward. But the moment people think they can read you, they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can control you. Today's world rewards the mysterious, not the open. When you keep people guessing, they project their own meanings onto you. They see depth where there might be none, strength where there's only silence. It's why the person who says less in a meeting often seems more powerful than the one explaining everything. Rule 2. Always appear slower than you are. In an age of speed, those who rush are slaves to momentum. The truly strategic act like time doesn't touch them. They don't react, they recalibrate. Machiavelli would move like a shadow, deliberate, calm, never competing with the noise of urgency. Because when everyone else is racing to speak first, the one who pauses owns the moment when silence becomes unbearable. Rule 3. Feed people's egos, not their logic. You can't out-argue insecurity. You can only feed it what it craves, validation. The modern manipulator doesn't win debates. He wins emotions. He understands that logic convinces no one who's already chosen how they want to feel. That's why online arguments go nowhere. Machiavelli would compliment your intelligence before planting a seed that destroys your certainty. People defend what they feel smart about, not what's actually true. Rule 4. Be visible but unreadable. Total invisibility breeds suspicion, but total exposure breeds weakness. Power lies in selective visibility. Show yourself just enough for people to believe they know you, then vanish before they can. The illusion of accessibility builds trust. The reality of mystery builds dominance. It's the same psychology behind celebrities who post every day yet reveal nothing real about themselves. You feel close to them, but you don't know them. That's control disguised as connection. Rule 5. Don't prove yourself, position yourself. Modern people chase validation. Machiavelli would chase perception. Proof is temporary. Position is permanent. You don't need to prove you're valuable if you're already treated like you are. The subtle shift happens when you stop competing for recognition and start creating the context where recognition happens naturally. You become the reference point others measure themselves against. Rule 6. Never react instantly. Reaction is proof of weakness. The strong always seem like they're considering something deeper, even when they're not. If you reply too fast, people assume you're desperate to be heard. If you pause, they assume you're calculating. That's how power works. It's not about truth. It's about what people believe your silence means. Rule 7. Weaponize gratitude. Not the performative kind, but the quiet, strategic kind. When someone does something for you, don't repay them too soon. Let the favor hang. Let it weigh on them. The longer gratitude remains unreturned, the more it becomes leverage. Eventually, they'll do more just to even the invisible balance. It's one of the oldest tricks, the debt that doesn't exist but still controls the debtor. Rule 8. Never fight battles that prove nothing. Most conflicts today are ego masquerading as principle. Machiavelli would refuse to engage in anything that doesn't improve his position. Every argument costs energy. Every reaction, reputation. He'd let others waste both. Because when people fight for pride, they bleed for free. Power is earned in restraint, the ability to win without declaring war. Rule 9. Let others underestimate you until it's too late. Everyone wants to look capable. Machiavelli would look harmless. The world fears threats, not fools. The fool disarms. He invites arrogance in others, and arrogance blinds them. The moment they stop guarding themselves, he moves. It's the same principle great strategists use. Disguise danger as weakness. There's no better camouflage than letting others believe they're smarter. Rule 10. Study motives, not actions. People's behaviors are surface-level noise. Motives reveal the architecture of their souls. The person who flatters you may not want to please you. They may want to use you. The person who criticizes you may secretly admire you. The world runs on hidden incentives. Machiavelli would watch what people need more than what they say. He'd know that if you understand someone's hunger, you can lead them anywhere. Rule 11. Detach faster than others attach. Power belongs to the one who can walk away first. Emotional attachment makes you predictable. Predictability makes you weak. If Machiavelli lived today, he'd never ghost anyone out of cruelty. He'd disappear out of control. Because the one who needs closure is always the one who lost control of the story. Rule 12. Make people choose between you and uncertainty. Fear of the unknown is still stronger than desire for the known. When people feel safe with you, even if that safety is an illusion, they'll cling to you. Machiavelli would make himself a constant in an unstable world. That's why powerful people aren't necessarily lovable. They're dependable. They offer structure in chaos, and people worship whoever can make chaos feel orderly. Rule 13. Don't seek fairness, create terms. Fairness is a concept built to comfort the powerless. Power comes from those who set the conditions of what's fair. When you negotiate, don't argue within someone else's frame. Build a new one. Machiavelli would never complain that the world is unfair. He'd make the unfair world work in his favor. That's what modern manipulators do without even knowing they're doing it. They define the standard before others notice. Rule 14. Be unpredictable enough to make people careful. Consistency is beautiful for trust, but deadly for dominance. If people can predict your next move, they stop respecting your presence. Machiavelli would sprinkle unpredictability like salt, just enough to make people second-guess how to approach him. When others can't anticipate you, they adapt to you. And when they adapt to you, you lead them. Rule 15. Use morality as performance, not conviction. The modern world worships virtue publicly but weaponizes it privately. Machiavelli would play the game better than anyone. He'd appear moral to calm people's fears but act amorally when results required it. Because what people really value isn't morality. It's the feeling of safety morality gives them. Give them the illusion of virtue, and you can hide entire empires behind it. Rule 16. Make others feel seen, even when you see through them. Nothing intoxicates people like recognition. Compliments cost nothing but build influence faster than logic ever could. Machiavelli wouldn't flatter, he'd reflect. He'd mirror people's ideals back to them so they'd see their best self in his presence. That's how followers are created, not by commanding, but by confirming. Rule 17. Speak like you're already right. Confidence bends reality. The difference between persuasion and manipulation is delivery. People don't follow certainty because it's true. They follow it because it feels safe. Machiavelli knew that doubt repels power. In modern life, whoever speaks like they've already won makes others subconsciously align with them. It's not arrogance, it's architecture. Rule 18. Reward loyalty, but never depend on it. Loyalty is fluid. It belongs to whoever seems like the safest bet at the moment. Machiavelli would reward loyalty publicly, but never believe in it privately. Because when people think you trust them, they work harder to deserve it. But if you actually trust them, they stop earning it. The trick is to make faith look mutual when it's actually measured. Rule 19. Know when to disappear. Withdrawal is as powerful as presence. When you vanish at your peak, people mythologize you. When you stay too long, they humanize you. Machiavelli would leave right before people realized they needed him. That's how legends stay immortal. They leave just before they decay into familiarity. Rule 20. Never compete on morals. Compete on results. Modern power hides behind ideals, but it still bows to efficiency. The person who produces outcomes will always own the person who produces outrage. Machiavelli would measure everything by effectiveness, what works, not what looks good. Because in the end, history doesn't remember the most righteous. It remembers the most relentless. Rule 21. Always control the narrative, even when you're not in the story. Silence can be rewritten. Absence can be misinterpreted. But the one who shapes the interpretation shapes the truth. Machiavelli would understand that power today isn't just about force. It's about framing. The world believes the version of events that's told first, told louder, and told with confidence. So he'd make sure even his enemies told his version without realizing it. And that's the hidden genius of Machiavellian power in the modern age. It doesn't need a throne, an army, or even visibility. It only needs the discipline to play a long game in a world that's addicted to short ones. Because while everyone else is fighting for attention, Machiavelli would already be fighting for control of the invisible forces that decide who gets attention in the first place. Power today doesn't look like it used to. It doesn't wear crowns, it wears calm. It doesn't shout, it whispers into the right ears. The modern battlefield isn't fought with swords or speeches, it's fought with perception. Machiavelli would understand that better than anyone. He'd know that people don't seek truth anymore. They seek confirmation. And whoever provides that confirmation first becomes their master without them ever realizing it. He'd start by mastering the art of invisibility in plain sight. In a world where everyone broadcasts their every move, the one who resists that urge becomes untouchable. When you post every detail of your thoughts, your opinions, your habits, you give people the map to manipulate you. But when you leave space for imagination, people fill it with awe. That's the paradox of power. The less you say, the more they think. The less they know, the more they fear. It's not about being secretive for its own sake. It's about weaponizing ambiguity. Machiavelli would also understand something most people forget. People don't want reality, they want reassurance. That's why influencers succeed more than leaders. They provide emotional certainty in an uncertain world. So he'd play both sides. He'd appear like the voice of reason while quietly being the architect of emotion. Because logic rarely changes behavior, emotion always does. The person who can make others feel right, even when they're wrong, has already won. He'd notice how easily people mistake attention for authority. They think being seen is power, but visibility without direction is chaos. So he'd let others chase visibility while he chased influence. The power to decide what becomes visible. Influence moves the spotlight. He wouldn't want millions of followers. He'd want the few who control millions. That's real modern royalty, not kings over people, but kings over platforms. Machiavelli would also understand that humility has become a trap. The world celebrates self-deprecation because it's safe. It makes others comfortable. But every time you downplay yourself, you invite others to believe it. Confidence is no longer about volume. It's about consistency. You don't have to declare you're powerful. You just have to behave like power is your default setting. He'd say, if you want people to believe you're above them, stop proving you're one of them. He'd notice how most people overshare their intentions. They talk about their goals, their hustle, their purpose, all to earn validation for effort rather than results. Machiavelli would never do that. He'd never tell people what he's building until it's already too late for them to stop it. Secrecy in progress amplifies power in execution. Because if people know what you're planning, they can prepare. But if they only see the aftermath, they can only react. And when it comes to influence, he'd understand that charm beats truth every single time. People don't follow who's right, they follow who's magnetic. The difference between a manipulator and a mentor is only direction. One leads people where he wants them to go. The other leads them where they want to believe they're going. Machiavelli would blur that line so carefully that even his followers would thank him for controlling them. He'd use empathy not as kindness, but as reconnaissance. Understanding how people feel isn't weakness, it's strategy. When you know what drives someone's emotions, you know how to steer their actions. He'd listen not to comfort, but to collect data. Every sigh, every hesitation, every need to be understood, those would become signals. The greatest manipulators don't dominate conversations. They draw them out. In the workplace, Machiavelli would be the one who never takes sides publicly, but somehow always ends up on the winning one. He'd never fight for position. He'd make positions fight for him. When everyone else is arguing over who's right, he'd quietly make sure the person with the power owes him something. Because alliances aren't built on trust, they're built on debt. A favor given is a chain disguised as generosity. He'd never chase fairness. Fairness is the currency of the weak, the vocabulary of those who lost control of the rules. The strong redefine fairness until it benefits them. Machiavelli would rewrite definitions in ways that make others feel like they've agreed willingly. That's the ultimate trick, to make people think your victory was their idea. That's how control becomes invisible. He'd also exploit one of the most underestimated modern weapons: silence during conflict. People are terrified of silence. They interpret it as disapproval, rejection, or judgment. Machiavelli would use that fear to let others reveal themselves. The longer he said nothing, the more others would rush to explain, to justify, to fill the space. Silence would make them confess more than questioning ever could. But his real genius would show in how he uses reputation. Most people think reputation is what others say about you. Machiavelli would know it's what you let others believe about you. He'd understand that image comes before reality. If people believe you're competent, they'll excuse your mistakes. If they believe you're dangerous, they'll avoid provoking you. So he'd invest in the illusion first, and let the illusion build the truth later. He'd manipulate kindness like a weapon too, not by faking compassion, but by showing it selectively. People trust those who are kind to them, not to everyone. The more he chose his empathy carefully, the more valuable it would seem. He'd help someone in public once, and they'd spend years defending him. That's how one act of kindness buys permanent loyalty. When it came to enemies, he wouldn't destroy them immediately. He'd contain them. Destruction breeds martyrs. Containment breeds irrelevance. If someone opposed him, he'd let them burn out in their own outrage while he stayed calm. People forget the angry, but they remember the composed. He'd know that the more emotion you show, the more control you lose. Anger is loud, but authority is quiet. And when opportunities came, he'd move with unnerving precision. Not early, not late, just at the moment others hesitate. Because hesitation is the silent destroyer of ambition. The one who moves when everyone else is still processing becomes the one others follow without question. That's not luck. That's timing disguised as intuition. He'd understand the digital world too. The way algorithms reward outrage, the way attention fuels influence. But instead of playing the same game, he'd weaponize it. While others compete for likes, he'd design the controversy. He wouldn't just go viral, he'd make others go viral for his agenda. That's how modern empires are built now, by controlling the emotional weather everyone else reacts to. And most importantly, he'd never aim to be loved. Love fades the moment it isn't rewarded. Respect, fear, fascination, those last longer because they don't rely on emotion, they rely on perception. Machiavelli wouldn't try to make people happy. He'd make them dependent. Because dependency doesn't ask questions, it obeys. He'd make himself the solution to their uncertainty. And once someone believes they need you, they'll forgive anything you do to keep them. This is how he'd outsmart everyone today, not by playing harder, but by playing quieter. By seeing what people can't admit about themselves and using it as the script for his moves. Because in the end, power still belongs to the same kind of person it always did, the one who can see clearly in a world that worships blindness. But even with all that power, Machiavelli would remind you of something everyone forgets. Dominance is fragile if it isn't renewed every day. Power decays the moment you stop adapting. That's why he'd never cling to a single identity. He'd reinvent himself before anyone realized they'd figured him out. The moment people think they understand you, your influence begins to rot. Predictability is death to authority. So he'd become a shapeshifter, a mirror that always reflects what others most want to see, while his real self stays untouchable. He'd recognize that people today mistake visibility for value. They confuse noise with impact. So while everyone else fights for more exposure, he'd refine scarcity. The less available he is, the more he's desired. It's why luxury brands don't advertise to everyone. They let their absence do the talking. In the same way, Machiavelli would never chase attention. He'd make attention chase him. When you make people wait, you condition them to see you as worth waiting for. He'd also see through the illusion of authenticity. In a culture obsessed with being real, people have forgotten that honesty isn't always power. It's often surrender. The powerful version of authenticity isn't transparency, it's controlled revelation. Tell people the truths that strengthen your image. Hide the ones that weaken it. Machiavelli would know that mystery doesn't contradict truth, it completes it. When you reveal everything, you lose leverage. When you reveal just enough, you gain devotion. He'd play with contrast. Be warm in private, cold in public. Generous with gestures, ruthless with boundaries. Humans don't fall in love with consistency. They fall in love with contrast. It keeps them alert, uncertain, addicted. Machiavelli would never aim to be predictable. He'd aim to be unforgettable. Because confusion isn't chaos, it's control disguised as charisma. He'd also exploit the greatest weakness of modern minds, their addiction to validation. People no longer think, they scan for agreement. They fear rejection more than failure. So he'd weaponize that fear. He'd agree when it costs him nothing, and disagree when it costs others everything. He'd make people crave his approval not because he gives it easily, but because he gives it rarely. Scarcity turns words into gold. When he finally speaks, everyone listens. Machiavelli would also know that control doesn't always mean domination. Sometimes it means dependency. Instead of crushing opposition, he'd make his opponents need him. He'd give them just enough rope to tie themselves to his plans. Dependency is cleaner than destruction. It lasts longer. A defeated enemy can recover. A dependent one never will. He'd feed his rivals what they desire most: relevance. And in exchange, he'd quietly own their decisions. He'd understand how technology has replaced territory. The new battlefield isn't land, it's attention. Every notification, every headline, every trend is a weapon. But unlike the rest, he wouldn't be consumed by it. He'd step back, watch what captures people's attention, and ask the real question: who benefits from this? Because the one who profits from distraction doesn't need to win arguments. He just needs to decide what people argue about. He'd never underestimate boredom either. He'd know that most people don't seek meaning, they seek stimulation. Give them something to feel, and they'll stop asking if it's true. That's why he'd never argue facts. He'd design feelings. Outrage, hope, fear, curiosity, each is a string. And he'd know exactly when to pull which one. Power today isn't about controlling people's actions directly. It's about controlling the inputs that shape their emotions. And in personal relationships, he'd master emotional distance. Not coldness, distance. Enough warmth to draw people in. Enough detachment to stay immune. Because when someone can't read how much you care, they start caring more. He'd let others guess whether they mattered to him, and the guessing would make them obsessed. That's how emotional dominance works. It doesn't demand attention, it provokes it. He'd also understand the subtlety of reputation as narrative control. It's not enough to be respected. You must be talked about in the right way. The key isn't to eliminate gossip, it's to design it. He'd leak just enough mystery to keep people speculating, because curiosity keeps his name alive even when he's absent. Every rumor becomes a seed of intrigue. Silence would be his co-conspirator, letting others write stories that only make him larger than life. And when it came to allies, he'd never surround himself with equals, only mirrors of his ambition. Equality breeds competition. Hierarchy breeds clarity. He'd make sure everyone around him needed his approval to feel important, not out of cruelty, but out of structure. When everyone's value flows through him, betrayal becomes unthinkable. Loyalty isn't built on love, it's built on architecture. But he'd also know when to destroy what he's built. Because real control requires the courage to burn your own stability before someone else does. Power doesn't die from external enemies. It dies from internal comfort. Machiavelli would dismantle his systems the moment they start working too well. He'd reintroduce uncertainty, force evolution. Because chaos, when controlled, is a renewable source of strength. It keeps followers afraid of loss, and fear is the glue of every empire. He'd study human nature not to judge it, but to predict it. He'd know that envy drives more decisions than logic, and that moral outrage is often just disguised jealousy. He'd never try to fix people. He'd use their contradictions like handles. When you understand someone's hypocrisy, you can make them predictable. Predictability makes them usable. And when he'd speak with precision. Every word would serve a purpose: to mislead, to seduce, or to direct. He'd never argue for attention. He'd make silence do the heavy lifting until people beg for his next sentence. Because when words become rare, they start to feel sacred. Most people think they need courage to gain power. Machiavelli would say they need detachment, to care without being captured, to love without losing leverage, to move with intensity but think with distance. Power isn't about being heartless. It's about having a heart that doesn't make the decisions. And above all, he'd understand timing. The patience to wait when others act too soon, and the instinct to act when others are still waiting. Every empire, every rise, every downfall comes down to timing. He'd say, don't seek opportunity, engineer it. Don't wait for permission. Create the conditions where permission becomes irrelevant. Because in the end, the world doesn't belong to those who deserve power. It belongs to those who understand when to take it. That's how Machiavelli would outsmart everyone today. Not with grand gestures, but with microscopic precision. Not by overpowering people, but by quietly owning their assumptions. His genius was never in manipulation. It was in understanding that people don't want the truth. They want to feel powerful, believing their own version of it. And the one who gives them that illusion rules them forever.